It's Monday, June 23rd, 2025, and it has been quite the weekend as we've watched the U.S. B-2 fighter jets send bunker bombs to pinpoint Iran's deep underground nuclear sites. And as we speak, there is retaliation going on from Iran to U.S. bases in the Middle East, so we'll see how that unravels. But today we have with us Lee Boyland, who predicted a year ago that Iran probably already had the nuclear capacity and the U.S. would be the only ones capable of taking out the deep underground nuclear sites. And you can check out that podcast on our YouTube channel. It was last May 20th, 2024, entitled Nuclear Engineer Believes Iran Already Has Nukes. So welcome back to our listeners to our Peace Through Strength brief, brought to you by the American Security Council Foundation. I'm your host.
It's always a pleasure to join you.
Thank you, Lee. I'm your host, Joy Votrobek, and that was Lee Boyland, our guest, and with us is senior analyst Laurence Sanford as well.
Joy.
Thank you, Larry. And Lee, welcome back, but if you don't mind, I'm going to give a little bit of your bio here. He is a former Army officer, engineer, businessman, and author. Mr. Boyland holds a Bachelor of Science degree in nuclear engineering. He's a retired U.S. Army officer who worked with the Defense Atomic Support Agency at the Sandia Base in Albuquerque. He has worked on nuclear device testing at Nevada test site. He has worked with the destruction of chemical weapons. I hope I'm getting this right, but ton containers and cluster bombs.
Yes.
And he worked in the design and manufacture of explosive warheads and anti-armor warheads. He's an atomic test veteran. So Lee, that being said, your thoughts on this bombing over the weekend? Do you believe there's a lot of talk of peace through strength? And I'm just wondering your thoughts on, do you believe this was justification, considering the International Atomic Energy Association said Iran had crossed the line, and you know we've been in numerous nuclear talks with Iran that have gone nowhere?
Well, Iran has been playing the whole thing like a fiddle for I don't know how long. They've been at this since the 1980s when they made the decision to pursue a nuclear weapon. And they just slowly worked their way up. They mastered the art of building centrifuge. They started out with the really crude ones that they got from Pakistan. And now they're up to I guess they're probably the most efficient designer and operator of centrifuge separation anywhere. And that's something they could sell to the Chinese, I would think, and North Korea. But they have never taken their eyes off the ball, and the ball was getting a nuclear weapon. And they have divided their nuclear program into civilian and military, much like we have. And the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Commission, has inspection rights on the civilian portion of it, which is the nuclear reactor and the power generator. I can't think of it. Richard. The weapons has been under the Republican Guard and limited access, and the IAEA inspectors, when they would go and inspect in Iran, they would only get to see the civilian sites. I got to get rid of this. Hang on. Okay. I'm going to put the phone on here. I'm going to take care of any more calls. So we've just been flim-flammed ever since, and Jimmy Carter bought into it. When Ronald Reagan came on, they knew that it was time to release the hostages that they'd held for 444 days, if I remember correctly, our diplomatic hostages from our embassy in Tehran. Reagan wasn't in a position, and he didn't have anything to destroy, such as by the time that Trump has. But we went through this with Obama, and then it's just been a farce of letting them get by with one thing after another. always telling us that they were going to do something and never doing it. And Trump said, he said, you have 60 days to come to the table. I really admire the man. 61st day, he hit them. They didn't learn anything. He said, come back to the table. And, he said, I'm going to give you, he said, I will make a decision sometime in the next 2 weeks. If you remember the way he phrased it, it was very well done. And I think he should have been a lawyer too. Nice. I got you there. He said he was going to make the decision sometime in the next 2 weeks. He didn't say he was going to wait 2 weeks. And about 2 days later, we went in and we destroyed Fordo, Natanz, and Ishfaram. And if we think about what do we have, the underground centrifuges are at Natanz and Fordo. Ishfaram had the uranium hexafluoride conversion plant, which is where you take the yellow cake that comes from the mine and you convert it to uranium hexafluoride, which is what's fed into the centrifuge. It's heated, and what you have is a very hot, very corrosive gas that goes through these centrifuges, and the spinning situation is fast enough. It's thousands of RPM per minute. The uranium separates by atomic weight of the differential of the two isotopes of uranium. It's very, very tiny amount of difference, but that's how you separate it. And the 235 stays in the center, and the 238, which is heavier, will be pushed to the outside of the spinning centrifuge, and it's pumped out of that centrifuge into the next one, and it just goes down what they call a cascade. And when you passed all of your uranium hexafluoride through the cascade, you have enriched the uranium by some small amount. In other words, you've increased the amount of U-235 in your in batch. So you start out with about 0.07% U-235, and you increase it, and you keep doing this until you get to 90% or better uranium U-235. Well, the last reports we had is they were approaching the 90% range, and apparently they have at least some U-235 enriched to uranium grade.
So
Yes, go ahead. Question.
Well, so how much 235 do you need to make a bomb? I mean,
you need 90% uranium, and it depends on the type of bomb and how you're going to detonate it. The gun types. The one I wrote about is for the terrorists in my first book all the way back in 2003. To make a gun-type nuclear weapon like the little boy that we dropped on Hiroshima, it was about 140 pounds.
Okay.
You get into the newer ones, you can probably do in the neighborhood of 20, 25 pounds.
Wow.
And implosion. And
yeah.
I remember reading a report that they had found, was it Pachin? Yeah, Pachin. It's a little north by northeast from Tehran. They had found parts of tests before the site was completely razed and literally paved over. And we think that's where they were testing their implosion systems and developed a way to implode the bomb, which is the way most of the nuclear weapons work. It's much more efficient than a gun type.
And so you're saying 25 pounds of uranium-235 could make a modern nuclear bomb that could...
Around 25 to 30 pounds, and it depending. It was a test run with the Koreans, and nobody seems to remember, but the Iranian scientists had been at the last several nuclear test in the North Korean test site. And the last one that was detonated there, Kim said it was going to be a thermonuclear explosion. You remember that?
Yes, I do.
He was beating around the bush. Well, I think what they did is they took the Soviet Slovak design, which means layer cake, and what it is, you start with layers of uranium-235, and then you put a layer of another material around it, and then you put the U-235 in it. It reminded me of an onion. I always thought of when I saw the designs of that and the cutaways of the warhead, it reminded me of an onion skin, because you look at an onion, if you cut it in half, you see the like layers on it, and they call it a layer cake. If you use the uranium and the other material, which would be lithium, you would now get a new what you call a prompt critical or a supercritical reaction. That's when the uranium starts to fission, which triggers a fusion reaction like the sun, which is thermonuclear, and you would have a fission reaction, which is what the Russians ended up doing. And their first test that they called a thermonuclear weapon was that design. And so it goes like this: if you started with a uranium or plutonium implosion, simple with nothing else, you would be in the, let's say, 40 kiloton range. If you switch to this layer cake design, you would be in the 400 kiloton range.
Big difference.
So it's an order of, a log higher.
So the question, Lee, I think everybody...
If you went to a pure two-stage thermonuclear weapon, you would be in the 4 megaton range or more. I think that North Korea, if you remember the last test that they were going to test their thermonuclear weapon, they haven't tested since. I think what they did is I think they shot the layer cake design, and the Iranian scientists were there, several of them. I think they got more than they bargained for. I don't think they realized that you got a log increase or an order of magnitude increase from what they'd been testing. I think what appears to me is that they collapsed their whole mountain.
So that's what I was leading up to, Lee. Do you believe, the question out there, do you believe that Iran was able to remove that uranium before the strikes, the U.S. strikes, or even the Iranian strikes?
Yeah, I think what you have is a bunch of these, as I started explaining, these stainless steel, huge containers that you can carry on a tractor trailer. You bring the enriched uranium at various grades out, and they store it, and then you send it back in, and you go through the cycles over and over and over again. Now, the cascades are now up to hundreds of actually, I think they have thousands of spinning centrifuges in their cascades, which means you can do a lot of processing with that, and they're very efficient. They've mastered the centrifuge design. They're probably the leading authority on it at this point. I think what we saw happening was that they were taking the cylinders of enriched uranium that they've run through the centrifuges. Now, whether it's all up to 90% or whether some of it was 85% or 88%, I don't think we know, and probably never will. But it's still not usable to make a bomb until you separate the uranium from the uranium hexafluoride. So that's another process. And that was being done at Ishfaram. And so the planning on this attack by the United States and Israel, it was very, very thorough. Not only did they get the centrifuges, but they got the conversion plant in Ishfaram that makes the uranium hexafluoride. And I suspect they got the reverse plant that would be used to pull the uranium out of the uranium hexafluoride gas.
Wow. Okay, so you can see why Trump
added to that nobody's mentioned is that they also had an explosive, a specialized high explosive manufacturing facility in Ishfaram that was designed primarily to get you the very high energy explosives for the lens of an implosion bomb. So we hurt them really, really badly. That uranium hexafluoride isn't going to do them any good if they can't separate it.
So let's assume they've already separated some. So you're saying basically 25 pounds, if smuggled to another area, could be made into a bomb?
You'd have to smuggle it to an area where they knew how to build an implosion device, and that's not at all easy to do.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I think, yeah, with a couple of modifications, around 25 to 30 pounds of uranium would make you a fairly decent less than 100 kiloton type bomb, probably around 40 to 60 kiloton range.
So how far do you think this set them back?
I'm sorry?
How far do you think this set them back, the strikes set them back?
I think we set them back very badly, yes. And I don't think we're finished because they may have already made, Iran has had the ability to make a Hiroshima type gun type weapon for years. They could have done that probably 10, 15 years ago, made one. Making one or two isn't good, and they realize that you have to be able to have a stockpile of weapons. The big worry that our military had back in World War II was if we only could make 2 bombs and we used them and everybody found out, the world would, we'd be a target for everybody. So if you're going to use these things, you've got to be able to produce them, and you have to have a stockpile and a way to deliver them. And that's what, the nuclear powers have. China, we have United States, China, Russia, England, France, and Israel have the ability to make and deliver weapons, and they have more than 1 or 2. They have a stockpile. I think Iran's now, if they had managed to make a few, they might have 1 or 2 warheads that they could mount on a missile that they put together, but they got nothing behind it. And if they launch a nuclear weapon, and they have to realize they're going to get about 10 back for every one they launch, and there won't be anything left of Iran.
Right.
And the thing that worries me about these people is that they have this belief that if you die doing God's work, Allah, you go straight to paradise. So that's how they get to convince people to go put on explosive vests and go out and detonate themselves and kill other people. You're saying, well, not only do you get to go straight to paradise, you get to take your family with you.
Yes, and
So,
on that note,
if you believe this, then it sounds like a really good deal to go commit suicide because it's not suicide, you're doing God's work.
harder, yeah.
And that's how they motivate these young people to go do it.
And that is concerning, Lee. And a question for really both of you: are you concerned about here in America cells that may have been here that are proxies of Iran, like Hezbollah?
Before Lee answers that question, I'd like to put a plug in.
Go ahead.
Put a plug in for Lee's book.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Lee, your books talked precisely about atomic bombs being smuggled into the United States. So could this scenario happen with, why don't you mention your trilogy, Lee, the 3 books?
The book is the Rings of Allah.
Rings of Allah.
And it comes from if you go back and look at the Hiroshima little boy, it consisted of a gun barrel, a projectile, and target rings. And that's where the rings came from in the title of the book. And it's the story of how the terrorists jihadists get their hands on some. In 2002, 2003, Iran was nowhere near able to make anything. So I wanted to tell the story of what they could do if they ever got their hands on enough uranium to make a gun-type weapon. And I wrote the story, and I let the terrorists find some old Soviet test devices that nobody knew was buried at the test site. And they got hold of them, and they took them apart, which you can do with a gun-type weapon. It's quite easy. And they smuggled the pieces in over a long period of time, over 10 years. And they set these gun-type devices up in different cities. And you don't have all the problems like you do with an implosion weapon. It's a very complex device. It takes a lot of skill. With a gun-type weapon, all you got to do is be able to fire a cannon. If you know how to fire a battlefield cannon, 105 millimeter, for example, you can fire a gun-type weapon. So in the book, I showed how they could bring them into the United States, assemble them, and leave them in place until they wanted to use them. And they could leave them in place for a long period of time. They don't require a lot of maintenance because there's no fancy electronics, there's no solid circuit boards or anything else. All you have is basically a current to fire a squib. A 6-volt or a 12-volt battery will fire the squib, and that shoots the cannon. That's all there is to it.
So
I think Iran has been able to do this for at least the last 10, probably 15 years. Now, whether they've done it or not, I don't know. But you're concerned about us being attacked. Thanks to Obama and Biden, we have thousands of young men in this country that we have no idea who they are, or where they came from, and they're all quite, capable. They look like they're fighting age military. So I think I would not be surprised if we get attacked internally from some of these cells that they're given their orders. Now, what they have, what kind of material do they have to use in the attack is a question that I hope the intelligence people have a handle on. And I certainly hope they haven't smuggled in a gun-type weapon, but they could have.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah, okay.
Sounds like they should make a movie out of his book there.
Yeah, should make a movie out of your books. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the second book was Behold an Ashen Horse, and that was since the whole United States government had been eliminated, one cabinet member was survived, and he became president. And he happened to be a retired military officer, a general, major general. And he was a model for Trump, really, because I created this character before Donald Trump even made any attempts to run for president. He was created, this was back in 2008, 2009, when we created the character. And he just did what has to be done to save the country. And he basically said, we're going to throw the rule books out the window. We're going to do whatever it takes to pull this country back together, and which is what he does in the first 3 books of the series. And then in the follow-up series afterwards, he starts the process of how we have to re-elect our government. Everybody, from the president, every congressman, every senator, and you have to. So he was challenging the people to find out what went wrong before you start voting for people. Find out what went wrong, and don't elect people that will make the same mistakes again. So that's basically the theory of the second part of the book. But back to this, I think we are in danger of Iran ordering Hezbollah or Hamas-type cells to become active in this country, which in fact I incorporated in the second book, Behold an Ashen Horse. We had just exactly that. The jihadist cells rose up and started jihads, their own little private jihads in various cities throughout the United States. And they had to be put down quickly.
Yes, thank you. That is a concern. And I did see from Homeland Security came out yesterday about definitely cyber security attacks and concerns here too.
That's another ball game that I never got into, but I understand enough of it to realize how vulnerable we are. I stayed away from cryptology. I had enough to worry about, and not with knowing as much about nuclear weapons as I did. I did not want to get involved in another whole different category of classified information. How
about, is there any kind of relationship with Pakistan as far as their nuclear programs in Iran? I mean, are they kissing cousins, or are they just sort of know each other and...
Well, I'm trying to think of his name. There was one of the Pakistanis, known as Mr. Atomic Bomb or something. He ran around and was showing different countries how to make centrifuges and how to make bombs. I can't think of his name, but he's gone, and I think he died of old age. And the relationship with Pakistan, I'm surprised that I really didn't know where Pakistan stood in all of this, but they have their problem. They're facing off with India, and both are nuclear powered, are powers, and so far there hasn't been any exchange, and that's really encouraging, because you have two Islamic. Well, India is a mixture of religions, but there's a large Islamic component into the population of India, and they don't. And then you have the Sunni Shia split, which are the two major categories of Islam. You have the Shia, which are mostly Iranian, and the Sunni, which are. The big difference is the Sunni believe that you should elect a caliph, and the Shia thinks that the caliph must be a descendant of Muhammad, or of blood or by marriage. And if you notice that the Iranians, Ayatollahs, some of them wear black turbans, and that means that they are a descendant from Muhammad. Mm. And if you wear the white turbans, you're not. That's basic. That's a big distinction. But I think Pakistan has surprisingly stayed out of this. They haven't caused anybody any trouble. And what really surprised me is that they nominated Trump for the Pulitzer Prize.
I saw that.
Yeah, and I was very pleased with that. And it appears that Pakistan has finally reached a stability level that you don't have to worry about them.
So maybe there's
I hope I'm right.
I hope you're right too, Lee.
Hope there for mutual mass destruction may work for deterrence in that case.
Yeah, well, I hope you're right, Lee.
Yes, I think the next month, maybe 2 months is going to be our danger period here to find out what Iran's going to do.
Yes, I do too.
And I hope that, and I think Trump is totally capable of it, that if he starts it, then the next attack is going to be against him. Mm. And Israel's been wanting to take him out for years. And
the Ayatollah?
They seem to be very good about knowing where things are in Iran.
Yes, they do.
Mossad is quite capable. And, I hope, Trump implied that he knew exactly where the Ayatollah was hiding. And I think, I don't believe he makes statements like that unless he really, he says what he means. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the Ayatollah really got to come up to the Grand Ayatollah is the right term, supreme leader. He's got to decide if he wants to live or does he want to go meet Allah.
Yes, good point.
Yeah. Russia's foreign minister, Medvedev, has indicated that other countries might supply Iran with nuclear weapons. Your take on that?
I did hear that.
I think that was running up the flagpole and see how many people shoot at it.
Oh, okay.
If they're dumb enough to do that, God help us.
Yes.
Because the Russians are infidels. Just like us, we're infidels. So are the Russians. And the Ayatollahs aren't going to make any distinction between the difference. There's no difference between killing an infidel American or an infidel Russian. Their whole desire is to make a worldwide caliphate, which everybody bows down to Allah and it's ruled by the clerics.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
That's the whole. That's really the game plan, is to convert the world to Islam, and that's what Muhammad wanted to do. Fight until all say there is no God but Allah. It's in the Quran, various wordings like that in several places.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Lee. You're a wealth of information on this, as always. Appreciate that. Larry, thank you
Well,
for your
thank you.
insight.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you, Lee, for the update. And thank you to our listeners. Please subscribe, comment, and share your thoughts on our Peace Through Strength and the strikes on Iran on our YouTube and Rumble channels. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Substack, and listen to us on your favorite audio podcast, either on Android or Apple phones. Thanks again, Lee. Thank you, Larry.
Thanks, Joy.
And to our listeners, join us again next time for our Peace Through Strength podcast.